Have you ever heard of the Fermi paradox? I thought not. Not when life has been so eventful that we have alien neighbors living alongside humanity. The Fermi paradox is the discrepancy between the lack of conclusive evidence of advanced extraterrestrial life and the high likelihood of its existence. As an article from decades ago said, if life is so easy, someone from somewhere must have come calling by now. We know there's life beyond our solar system. Hell, there's life in our solar system. With the defeat of the Witness and the beginning of this new age for humanity and its allies, we must look back at all that we have conquered and what still lurks out there. As we prepare to track down and tie up the loose end that is known as VIP number 4503, also known as Fikrul or the Fanatic, the Vanguard has authorized me to compile and format all known information on our Eliksni allies and fallen enemies, to help New Lights understand the world around them, and for us to get a better picture of those living within our city walls. With assistance from House of Light's scribe Eido, we have compiled and decoded all known information about the Eliksni from both the Vanguard archives and records from House Light. Get ready to take notes, Guardians. Our enemies have no limits, and neither should we. This is the law of the jungle, as old and as true as the sky, and the wolf that shall keep it may prosper, but the wolf that shall break it must die.
Initiating System 1. System 1 loaded.
Throughout this brief, there will be two distinct names for this race. The name we use for our allies and the name we use for our enemies. The Eliksni are on our side, while the Fallen are not. Be sure to understand the difference if you wish not to cause a scene in the streets. The Eliksni are an insectoid alien species, once known to be peaceful gardeners. Nowadays, they are infamous for being notorious scavengers and raiders. But, long before they became the Fallen, they were a mighty civilization. The Eliksni originated from the planet known as Reese. They were once graced by the Traveler, which they named the Great Machine. They were presumably uplifted by its gifts in the same manner as humanity, such as an unlimited supply of fresh ether, the sustaining white gaseous substance that only servitors can currently produce. That white mist that pops out of their heads when you land a precision kill? Yep, that's ether. Their ubiquitous cloaking technology was originally designed as toys for children. The Eliksni made during their golden age twice the advancement in space exploration than humanity. During this time, they came to control multiple star systems until an event known as the Edge Wars brought infighting among the houses, and later ended by the House of Kings and House of Judgment to usher in a golden age. During this time, an old house known as the House of Rain would tell a prophecy that described a unification of the Eliksni under a single Kell, the Kell of Kells. The Great Machine will marvel, moved by might, and come to crown him Kell of Kells. The title Kell of Kells refers to a member of the Eliksni who is designated to unite the divided houses of the Fallen, be blessed with the power of the Great Machine, and to bring about a new golden age for the Eliksni people. The Eliksni had flourished under the Traveler's grace, until the Witness and its Black Fleet caused an apocalyptic event known as the Whirlwind, much akin to humanity's golden age and collapse. From the records we have access to, and from the accounts of a few remaining survivors, a Kell known as Chelchis, Kell of the House of Stone, remained behind to hold the line against VIP number 2015, Oryx, the Taken King. As his fellow Eliksni fled Reese, whether or not Chelchis was outright killed or taken by Oryx is unknown, but his death is all but confirmed in Eliksni society. The Traveler fled, leaving the survivors behind, but after many centuries, the Eliksni, now known as the Fallen, founded again in the Sol system. Seeking to reclaim their glory, the Fallen decided to explore the newly discovered solar system and start a war against humanity in an attempt to retake control of the Great Machine. Roving Fallen bands scavenge whatever technology and weapons they can find and rally under the banners of various warring houses and crime syndicates. In the aftermath, the surviving Fallen became embroiled in a bloody civil war over the civilization's ruins, before achieving a tenuous peace and embarking on a journey to space to locate the Traveler, to return to greatness. The Fallen eventually arrived in the Sol system during the Dark Age and rediscovered the Traveler here on Earth. During their travels through the vast emptiness of space, the Eliksni began transforming into the society we know them now as, the Fallen. This event would be known as the Long Drift. Notable bodies from their societal structure, such as Elders and Skaith, perished. The House of Judgment, who once maintained peace as mediators between the houses, also suffered great losses and dwindled in size. The Eliksni formed a pact between themselves where House Judgment shall have no catch, and live among the other houses to guide their kells. However, this changed when the surviving Eliksni embroiled themselves in a bloody civil war, as the Wolves dueled with the Kings and Scar fought with Winter over the ruins of their civilization. Forced to abandon their home world, the noble kells of the various houses ordered a mass exodus, searching for salvation by following the Traveler across space in hopes of returning to their former glory. The kells instructed their respective prime servitors to calculate star flights, and relayed the information to pilot servitors to pilot their catches. This period of space flight lasted for centuries, and the Eliksni raised many generations of hatchlings as they traveled through the dark expanse. One of these hatchlings came to be the kell of our Eliksni allies in the House of Light, VIP number 3987, Mithrax. This new generation of Eliksni was deemed unlucky as they never witnessed the glory of Reese, and were brought up on the stories of war songs that celebrated their lost culture. Their catches also became sacred homes as they fostered many clans and families who carried remnants of their dying culture, such as ceremonial washing bowls, children's musical instruments, and ceremonial effigies of servitors. As the Eliksni raced across the stars, they became increasingly desperate, and soon developed a dependence upon the machines they created. This deep-root reliance turned them to developing weapons for fighting, ships for flying, and servitors for survival. Their cloaking technology was originally the toys of children, but soon developed into a tool of warfare, employed by notable groups such as the Silent Fang. Servitors processed matter and energy into ether, a substance once found in abundance on Reese, providing sustenance to the Eliksni. When consumed in higher quality, the Eliksni are filled with strength. Their inherent need turned into worship of the servitors, and later a new faith emerged among the Eliksni society. The status of Archons grew as their roles shifted to the consecration of servitors, and carefully maintaining their plating. The Archons were celebrated as esteemed leaders and looked upon to provide hope to the depressed Eliksni through their words, teachings, and interpretations of their machine gods. However, as the long drift persisted, the kells neglected their old customs and adopted new means of survival. They established a new social hierarchy amongst the Eliksni and grew stronger by having the largest access to ether, followed by their nobility. Disgraced Eliksni were docked into subservice, and ether rations were reduced among the population as they were starved and malnourished. This strengthened the Eliksni as a whole, as they were able to survive the hard flight through space. However, their new faith would start to fracture as some viewed veneration of servitors as a mean of control. As the long drift continued, many Eliksni began abandoning houses and acting like pirates to survive, with some individuals taking over catches of others and incorporating them into their fleets. This earned them the moniker of catch killers. Eventually, the Fallen reached the Sol system and found the Traveler, now protected by us instead of having fled like with them. Enraged, they attacked humanity, beginning the 100-year conflict known as Eliksni Siege. There were 4 major events during this siege. These were known as the Battle of Six Fronts, the Battle of Twilight Gap, the Reef Wars, and the Crusade. The first major battle with the Fallen occurred on the outskirts of the Lost City's territories between the Fallen and squads of Titans led by the Iron Lords. This was a vain attempt to take the Traveler. The House of Devils staged this coordinated attack on the city. Despite attacking on multiple fronts, the Titan defense held, and the attackers were forced to retreat. During the battle, 4 orders of Titans protected the newly constructed walls of the city against 6 enemy approaches, and not a single front faltered. The Devils faced off against many Guardians who would later become legends, such as Saint 14, Osiris, Zavala, and the Iron Lords. This would come to be known as the Battle of Six Fronts, and is how the Titans earned their crest. After the Battle of Six Fronts, Saint 14 stepped down from the Vanguard commander position to pursue his crusade against the Fallen and nominated Osiris to take his place, to protect the city from future assaults. Osiris questioned Saint's motives, and having seen the Fallen not too different from them. However, Saint disagreed after fighting representatives from every house and believed it was a joint effort to exterminate them. At some point, Saint 14 encountered the noble Secrus, Baron of Shanks, whose house settled by the edge of the system to avoid human conflict. Secrus recollected Saint's sieges of Boyle Pass and weapons of rain, but questioned if the Great Machine still communed with him. Saint answered with silence and spared Secrus, causing him to desert his race. Following the murder of several guardians at the hands of Tanix, the Scarred, the Speaker dispatched Saint 14 and Osiris to eliminate the deadly Fallen mercenary, but Cade 6 located Tanix and killed him. This elevated Andal Brask to the vacant seat of the Hunter Vanguard after losing a dare to Cade over who would kill Tanix. However, it was later revealed that the resilient Fallen had survived the encounter. Under the manipulation of the House of Kings Kel Krask, the Fallen decided to begrudgingly put aside their differences and fight together to storm the last city and claim the Traveler. 3 houses, the House of Devils, Kings, and House of Winter, joined their forces in an all-out assault on the last city, culminating at the Twilight Gap. Unknown to the last city, another Fallen house sought to join their brethren in the battle, the House of Wolves, and with their support they might have turned the tide in their favor. However, for reasons known only to her, the Reef Queen Mara Saw launched a surprise attack on the wolves at Ceres, claiming half their numbers. Their then Kel, Virex, was killed in the initial clash, along with a massive portion of the house which would later be called the Scatter. During the wars, Skolas the Rabid, through savagery and cunning, rose to fill the role of Wolf Kelship. Then began the bloody Reef Wars, which ended with the Reefborn awoken the victors, as the Wolves' nobility and new Kel Skolas was imprisoned. Mara Sov gave them the choice of either living in the Reef with Mara as their new leader, or perishing. The majority chose the former, while others went off into hiding. Without the Wolves' support, the Fallen failed to claim the Traveler. While city artillery battled with Fallen walkers, the Guardians led by Lord Saladin fought against the siege. Despite the Fallen's efforts and the Guardian casualties, the Guardians held the line and forced the Fallen into a retreat. Only Sulcus, Kel of Devils, refused to retreat and continued to fight, only to be killed by Saint 14. The Fallen were then completely routed from the city, thanks to the counterattack led by Lord Shax. The Fallen then ceased to work together again and retreated to different parts of the solar system, to their own devices. The Devils retreated to the Cosmodrome, the Winters retreated to Venus, and the Kings continued to hide in the shadows of old Russia. In addition, a new smaller house was formed from the malcontents and outcasts from the others, after the failure at Twilight Gap. This would be known as the House of Exile, which had taken residence on the moon. The Fallen has no shortage of muscle to fight their bloody battles, so you need to know what you're up against. Starting from the lowest of lows is the Wretch. Wretches are 2-armed, spear-wielding Fallen. The act of having their lower 2 arms removed is called docking. This is used as a punishment, but also as a means of inspiration to earn the right to regrow their limbs. These brave, or more so desperate, warriors are armed with arc spears, which they use to get into close quarters combat despite their frailty. Dregs. Dregs, also known as Drex in their tongue, are the second lowest rank in Fallen society. They are far less disciplined than their Vandal or Captain counterparts, and often give away their position with chattering. Much like their Wretch brethren, the Dregs also have 2 arms instead of the standard 4. Shanks. Shanks are small floating drones employed by the Fallen as scouts, fire support, or to serve as a distraction. Marauders. Marauders hold a similar stature as Vandals. They are identifiable by their hooded cloaks and robes they wear, but they also are almost always invisible thanks to their stealth tech. They are often deployed in scavenging and assassination missions. Vandals. Vandals take pride in every world they pillage. They are soldiers, brawlers, assassins, and scouts. Their bloodlust knows no bounds. Servitors. Servitors are alleged to be made in the image of the Traveler, making them a pivotal role in Eliksni society before the Whirlwind. Nowadays, they are used as a source of creating ether for the starved fallen. They are considered holy machines, so whenever the opportunity to destroy one arises, take it. Captains. Captains carry themselves with an air of superiority and nobility, and are in the final stage of an Eliksni's growth cycle before the Whirlwind. They are armed to the teeth and have a personal arc shield and a short-distance teleporter. Barons. Barons are high-ranking fallen nobility who outrank captains but fall below their house's Archon. A Baron commands one or more skiffs in their respective crews. Archon Priests. These religious figures act as an intermediary between a house's Kel and its Prime Servitor. If an Archon falls, then the Prime Servitor becomes vulnerable to attack. Prime Servitors. These are the main sources of a house's ether supply. They are considered the holiest of holy items the fallen have in their possession. Destroying one of these can collapse an entire house, as it did with many of our old foes. Kells. These are the political leaders of their respective houses and command their own catches. They are rarely seen in the field of battle due to their high level of importance, so if you ever spot one, take the shot. The only fallen factions that don't have a known Kel are the Old Crews, Tannix's crew, Kel's Scourge, House of Exile, and House of Dusk. So far I've mentioned the name of several fallen houses throughout this brief. I believe it's time to take a closer look at these houses and some of the factions that have splintered off from them. Let's start with our most devious adversary from the Fallen, the House of Devils. House of Devils, believed once to be known on Reese as the House of Dancers, were among those involved in a period of rising tensions and infighting between the houses, which culminated in a conflict known as the Edge Wars. During the Long Drift, the Devils experienced a reformation as the various Kells from different houses neglected their old customs and established a new social hierarchy amongst the Eliksni, such as docking and the veneration of servitors. Archons became the caretakers of servitors and looked upon them to provide hope to the depressed fallen through their words and interpretations of their new machine gods. Critis, a prominent devil-born, clung to the belief that they were meant for a higher purpose and meant to evolve beyond their current forms. All the while she endured a life of subsistence alongside her fellow Eliksni who received succor of ether from their prime servitors. Following their arrival in the solar system, the Devils terrorized humanity and ransacked their settlements across Earth. They met resistance in the form of Guardians who opposed their tyranny. However, the Devils demonstrated their brutal dominance by burning down London. The Devils established an outpost on Venus, while their war-torn walkers can be found across the European Dead Zone. They also claimed the Cosmodrome of Old Russia as their territory, and searched for hidden technology beneath. VIP number 2029, the Devil Baroness Aramis, was stationed there alongside her friends Critis and Phylax, and developed a close kinship with them. The formidable trio spent years raiding human settlements and fending off members of rival houses that attempted to encroach upon the Devil's territory. Each aspired of Kelship, as the three dreamt of ways to defeat their mighty Kel Sulcus and take control of the house for themselves. While Zavala was still part of the Iron Lords, he routinely defended human caravans from the Devil's raids. He would eventually rescue an orphan baby from one of these raids, adopting him with his wife Sophia, and naming him Hakim. The three would eventually leave the Lord's camp and go to live in a distant village, which he defended from numerous raiding parties. Eventually, Kethicus, the Yet Proven, ordered to bring vengeance and hunger for glory, would lead a raid of unprecedented violence, personally killing Hakim before being slain by Zavala. Despite the captain's death, this event shattered the Lightbearer's family, and he returned to the Iron Lords. At some point, a guardian named Rezil Azir ventured out of the city and gained great enmity from the Fallen. A devil captain named Exori ambushed Rezil in an attempt to kill him to gain respect among his devil brothers. However, Rezil was able to fend off the ambush and kill the captain and his crew. The Devils would continue to be a thorn in their side up until the end of the Siva crisis. House of Winter. Before arriving in the solar system, the House of Winter was one of many fallen houses struggling to survive in the wake of the cataclysmic event known as the Whirlwind. In the aftermath of the fall, Winter was said to have warred with the House of Scar. There is evidence they were present attacking the city of Caracas during the collapse. They eventually settled in on Venus, showing interest in the archive of the Ishtar Academy, seeking to plunder the Golden Age technology within, as well as towards the nearby Vex Citadel. Years later, following a message sent by the Kel of Kings calling for a coordinated attack on the city, Draxus, the Kel of Winter, temporarily allied his house with the House of Devils and Kings to join in the planned assault. In the ensuing carnage, later to be known as the Battle of Twilight Gap, The united fallen houses were eventually forced into a full retreat due to the valiant efforts of the Guardians. Following the failed assault, the House of Winter returned to scavenging the Venusian ruins and came into conflict with the Vex. The persistent battles between the House of Winter and Vex led to the Vex creating the Hezin Corrective, intending to annihilate the House of Winter's presence on Venus. It is believed that sometime after the Battle of Twilight Gap, Winter's prime servitor, Simic Prime, was destroyed, though proof of its demise remains elusive. This loss left the leadership of the house in a precarious state. Draxus continued to wage war against the city, raiding jump ship convoys, using guerrilla tactics, later causing Cade 6 of the Vanguard to personally raise the bounty on him. House of Kings. House of Kings was distinguishable by their three-pointed yellow cloaks. Among the Eliksni they were unique, secretive, and dangerous. Their power is only matched by their cleverness. They hide in the shadows, waiting, and plotting the downfall of the last city and the reclamation of the Traveler. The power vacuum following the death of Sulcus allowed Kresk, Kell of Kings, to maintain some influence among the techno-worshipping leadership of the Devils and return to the shadows, choosing to bide their time and plan their next assault. The Kings held very little territory in the Cosmodrome, holding only the terrestrial complex and King's Watch. They were encountered by Guardians seeking out a mysterious signal in the area, and again later when they returned to try and restore the array in the terrestrial complex. Later, the Hive General Omnigul would lead a fire team of Guardians through King's territory in an attempt to stop them from hunting her. Fiksin, King Baron, attempted to stop the Guardians personally, but was killed in the resulting battle. Approximately 1 year after the events of the Siva Crisis, the Kings, as well as the other fallen houses, seemed to vanish entirely, the never-before-seen House of Dusk taking their place. Further inspection revealed that many members of the new House of Dusk originated from the other now-dissolved fallen houses, including the House of Kings. All House of Dusk communication protocols were variations of old Kings protocols, suggesting significant involvement of the Kings within the new house. It was later discovered that Krask, the former Kell of Kings, had ordered Uldren Sov to unite the remaining fallen houses under the banner of House Dusk. That was until Uldren and Fikrul returned and outright destroyed the house, turning them into the first set of Scorn. House of Wolves, distinguishable by their blue armor and tattered dark grey cloaks. Before arriving in the solar system, the House of Wolves was called Muraskalesin, or Gentle Weavers. As part of the United Fallen effort, the Wolves intended to join the Battle of Twilight Gap alongside the other fallen houses, but were stopped at their stronghold of Ceres when the Reef intervened. Their Kell Virix was killed in the initial clash, along with a massive portion of the house, which would later be named the Scatter. This marked the start of a power struggle between three members of the Wolves' nobility: Irix, Wolf Baroness, Paraxis, the Howling, and Skolas, the Rabid. During the wars, Skolas rose to Kellship, beating out his competitors. He then turned his full attention towards the Reef, and the two forces clashed for many years. The wars ended with Varix, a member of House of Judgment who lived among the Wolves, betraying Skolas to the Reef, resulting in his capture along with most of his house. Varix went on to crown the Queen of the Reef as the new Kell, with many wolves bending the knee to her. Initiated by the return of Skolas, now calling himself the Kell of Kells, the House of Wolves rebelled against the Awoken. The Wolf Rebellion started with an assassination attempt on the Queen and a mass prison break from the Prison of Elders, where most of the former Wolf nobility were being held. The Queen opened the Reef to the Guardians of the city, with the intent of recruiting them to put an end to the rebellion. VIP number 2014, alongside two other Guardians, tracked down Skolas across the system, eventually capturing him on Venus, attempting to wield stolen Vex tech to pull the House of Wolves through time. On the order of the Queen, Skolas was sent to the Prison of Elders, where he was pitted against the same Guardians who captured him and was executed, effectively ending the Wolf Rebellion. After Skolas' defeat, the Wolves began regrouping on Mars, hoping to carve out a new den on a planet of their own. The Wolves emerged from hiding, rallying under Keldar, Archon Priest, who had escaped during the Reef Wars and Skolas' rebellion. Keldar offered the Wolves a new god to worship, the rebuilt Orbix Prime, the Wolves' previous god, to lead their scattered house in the absence of a new Kell. In the wake of losses suffered during the Taken War, the Cabal was unable to stop the Wolves from entrenching themselves in their fortifications. The Blind Legion's former base was captured for use as Orbix Prime's lair. Orbix Prime attempted to reassemble the house on Mars. However, thanks to intel provided by Varix, the Guardians hunted down Keldar and Orbix, destroying the Prime and their escaping Archon. The Guardians left the Wolves broken and leaderless once more. This in turn led Varix to believe that the House of Wolves had been broken once and for all. Following the Red War and the formation of House of Dusk, the House's servitors were destroyed by Rexis Van, and the remaining wolves have since defected to other houses, such as the House of Dusk and House of Salvation. House of Exile. The House of Exile was a smaller, newer house, made up of the malcontents and renegades of other houses after their sparking defeat at Twilight Gap. They attempted to carve out a realm for themselves on the surface of the moon, despite the heavy presence of the Hive. The exiled serve no Kel or Archon, making them an abnormality among the fallen. During a mission to the moon, former Hunter Vanguard Cade 6 met a Baroness of the Exiles, whom he later fought alongside. At some point before the Red War and the creation of the House of Dusk, 8 dregs of the Exiles were cast out. These 8 were known as Elchris, Pyrrha, Hyrax, Canix, Rexis Van, Araskis, Yavix, and none other than Fikrul himself. They banded together in the Tangled Shore and founded the Scorn, a group of exceptionally violent fallen pirates. House of Judgment. It is one of the oldest fallen houses dedicated to the return of traditional Eliksni society. The House of Judgment is of 4, having existed since before the Fallen Cataclysm, known as the Whirlwind. In the past, House of Judgment was the house that kept the peace between all fallen houses, being the mediator to avoid fighting between them. House Kells would seek counsel with them to better lead them away from the battle with other houses. But after the Whirlwind and the splintering of houses, their numbers decreased, making it harder for them to both keep the peace and prevent infighting between houses. Soon they spread themselves among the houses, obeying the Kells and worshipping their prime servitors. Likewise, when the House of Wolves fell to the reef, House of Judgment survived by swearing loyalty to its queen, Mara Sov. Only one known survivor of this house remains, VIP number 1121, Varix the Loyal, Kell of House Judgment. House of Scar. The House of Scar is only mentioned briefly by Varix the Loyal as a house that came into conflict with the House of Winter after the Whirlwind destroyed fallen civilization. Its current status is unknown. However, Scar has been briefly mentioned to have been dust alongside extinct houses, such as the House of Stone and House of Rain. It is theorized that Tanix once belonged to this house, and that the symbols on his cloak belonged to said house. House of Stone. Very little is known about this house. From what information we have access to, and from what Eido has shared with us, this house was lost with the Whirlwind when it and its Kell stood before the Taken King, and held the line while the remaining Eliksni fled Reese. House of Rain. The House of Rain was a fallen house distinguishable by their dark purple cloaks and armor. Regarded as the lowest noble house in the aftermath of the cataclysmic Whirlwind, they were once believed by Varix to have been destroyed, but later revealed that they had survived and reached Sol. During the height of Eliksni culture, House of Rain members once prophesied that a fallen warrior, whose enemies would flee or fall, would one day rise to heal the houses and make them whole, and be christened the Kell of Kells. The house was believed destroyed by the Whirlwind that ruined the fallen civilization, but some members managed to get to Sol. During the Dark Age, the house tracked a small group of human colonists to Mercury. They destroyed the settlements and killed the survivors, but were unable to kill their protector, Saint 14, due to VIP number 2014's actions. Alongside their hunt for humanity on Mercury, the house was in constant conflict with the invasive Vex. The house is believed to have been destroyed by Saint 14 in an event called the Breaking of the Weapons of Rain. The Old Crews, called Catch Killers and Skiff Blades by other fallen, unaffiliated pirate crews that have existed since the Long Drift. Many make their lairs in the asteroids of the Themis cluster. Tanix's crew. Tanix's crew is an unaffiliated gang of fallen loyal to the mercenary Tanix the Scarred. The crew plays an important role in rebuilding his physical body with mixtures of technologies pilfered from legendary treasure troves and endless body parts. Due to this, Tanix has built a reputation amongst the Eliksni in the Last City for being an undying huntsman. Tanix alone has been responsible for the death of the former Hunter Vanguard Andal Brask, passing on the Vanguard dare to that of Cade 6. Kell's Scourge. The Kell's Scourge was a crime syndicate of the Anarchist Fallen led by VIP number 004-Fallen-Civ, aka Civic's Lost to None, the deranged brother of the Spider. They are hell-bent on sowing chaos wherever they go and actively seeking to use the technology of the Black Armory to gain power and control. They would later be subsumed into the ranks of the House Salvation, when some of their technology would be used. Before the death of Cade 6, Civix was captured and imprisoned by his brother. Over time, the brothers drifted in ideology, and eventually, Civix's troublemaking pushed the Spider to send him to the Prison of Elders. Eventually, he made his escape during the mass breakout of the prison, and formed the Kel's Scourge as a rival syndicate to his brothers. House of Spider. The House of Spider, also known as Spider's Crime Syndicate, is a fallen criminal enterprise led by the Spider, that formerly resided within the Tangled Shore, and is now based in the Last City. It is previously allied with the Guardians to fight back against the Scorn, and has now joined forces with the House of Light and the Vanguard against the forces of the Witness. The Spider began his so-called house in the Tangled Shore shortly after leaving behind his Wolfborn house. House of Dusk. The House of Dusk is a fallen house, distinguishable by its purple cloaks and armor. They recently emerged following the advent of the Red War and were founded by the former awoken Prince Uldren Solve, under orders by the Kell of House of Kings, Krask. They engaged in conflicts with every faction in the system. Sometime after the Reef's disastrous attack on the Dreadnought, the surviving Prince Uldren Solve allowed himself to be captured by the House of Kings to gain an audience with their Kell, Krask. Krask reluctantly bent the knee to Uldren and beseeched him to carry the message to every other fallen house, to abandon their old loyalties, end their rivalries, and join together for the sake of survival. The House of Dusk adopted their purple banners from the House of Rain that attacked a settlement on Mercury when it was still a garden world. The armor of the House of Rain was also adopted, more ornamental in appearance due to the house's prophetical stance. These contrasted rather starkly with the Fallen's previous more militant armor, which was nearly full body. Following the Devil Splice's defeat at the peak of the Siva crisis, the Fallen collectively retreated from all their hardcore strongholds, leaving behind their old banners and armor in ceremonial piles and burnt ash. House Salvation. The House of Salvation, or House Salvation in Eliksni, is a massive fallen house distinguishable by its white and indigo cloaks and armor. Founded by Aramis, Kell of Darkness, a former baroness of the House of Devils who originally sought to reform her old house, but later abandoned them to form a new fallen empire, comprised of former Devils, Winter, Dusk, Wolves, and Kell Scourge members, all unified to rebuild their Eliksni civilization. Aramis led the new formed house to Europa and acquired the powers of darkness from the Witness and its Black Fleet, plotting revenge against the Traveler in the last city that defends it. After failing her duty to recover all relics of the disciple Nezarec, Aramis and her house became subjugated by the Witness into servitude of the Hive god Xivu Arath and her armies, with many Eliksni members having been either enslaved into the form of Taken, Wrathborn, or reanimated into Scorn. Once Aramis defected from its cause and abandoned the Sol System, the fallen house had permanently folded under the Witness's control, its members vying to enact the final shape and a promised end to their collective suffering. The Scorn. The Scorn is a faction of undead fallen spawned by darkness-tainted ether, initially created by the Taken Ahamkara Riven of 1,000 Voices, using wish magic. Under the leadership of Fikrul the Fanatic and Uldren Solve, the Scorn orchestrated a massive breakout from the Prison of Elders, murdered the Hunter Vanguard K6, and went on to spread across much of the Reef and the Dreaming City. More recently, many became enthralled by the Witness and its followers, who used them as pawns against the Guardians and the turncoat Hive god Savathun. It has also been observed that the Scorn have been creating their own culture, roughly based on old Eliksni and Fallen practices. Their ranks are made up of scribes, stalkers, ravengers, wraiths, raiders, abominations, and chieftains, all twisted and deformed versions of their fallen counterparts. Finally, we have the House of Light. The House of Light, or House Light for short, is a newly formed Eliksni house distinguishable by its dark green and brown cloaks and armor. Founded by Mithrax, Kell of Light, they are an ally to the Last City who first provided intel of the heist on the Old Tower, and later the dark activities of House Salvation. Mithrax would go on to proclaim that he would become the Kell to the open-minded Fallen, who were willing to fight for the Traveler together with humanity. Later, Ikora sought the help of Mithrax to help end the endless night, created by the Vex. Due to the house being comprised of Eliksni refugees who deserted their former houses, they were granted shelter within the city, called the Eliksni Quarter.
Years after the Battle of the Twilight Gap, the Vanguard have maintained their defenses, but only recently have they decided to launch new offenses on their enemies, the Fallen especially. The first offense came with the death of the Devil Archon, Rixus, at the hands of a newly risen Guardian. Without their Archon, the Devil's Prime Servitor, Sepix Prime, was left vulnerable. Forming a team, the Guardians invaded the Devil's Lair to battle with the Prime Servitor and destroyed it, depriving the Devils of leadership. On the planet Venus, the Guardians finally tracked down the Winter Kell Draxus, who had attacked scouting and supply ships for years. Fighting to his catch and through his guard, the Guardians cornered the Kell in his throne room and killed him, leaving the House of Winter leaderless and its members under the threat of infighting. With the loss of their Kell, the Winters decided to find new leadership. Enlisting the aid of the mercenary Tanax the Scarred, the Fallen broke into the Reef's prison of elders and stole the prison cell of Axor, Archon Priest. However, the Vanguard heard of their efforts and sent a team of Guardians to kill the priest. Tracking the prisoner, the Guardians faced off against Axor just when he was released from his prison, and succeeded in killing him, leaving the Winters leaderless once more. On the moon, the Guardians prevented the House of Exile from stealing Hive relics from one of their temples, killing one of their barons in the process. A fallen resurgence occurred in the new form of the House of Wolves, whose Kell had returned, possibly aided by the Nine, and led by the Wolf Fallen in rebellion against the Awoken. In retaliation, Mara Sov placed bounties on the Wolves' nobility while enlisting Guardians to hunt down Skolas. While investigating, the Guardians tracked the Wolf Kell to Venus, who sought to gain the allegiance of the leaderless House of Winter. The Guardians found Skolas rallying the Winter House after calling himself the Kell of Kells, a prophesized warrior who would unite the Fallen and reclaim the Traveler. While the Guardians failed in their chance to capture Skolas, they began to disrupt his operations in preventing him from gaining the allegiance of other houses, hunted down his followers, and thwarted his attempts to gain dangerous weapons from the Vex Vault of Glass. Cornered and deprived of allies, Skolas set up the last stand at the top of the Vex Citadel, with the Queen's Crows waiting to capture the Kell. Challenging the Mad Kell, the Guardians faced off against Skolas, who began using the Vex Warp Gates to bring his house from across time. Despite his efforts, Skolas was defeated into submission and sent back to the Prison of Elders. There, Skolas' sentence of execution was carried out by the Guardians, leaving the House of Wolves leaderless, homeless, and humiliated, while the other houses were also weakened. Both the Guardians and Fallen were heavily affected by Oryx's arrival and his taken. The Fallen were taken in huge numbers, forcing most of the houses to abandon their holdouts. Those Fallen that became taken were eventually defeated by the Guardians. Hoping to take advantage of the Guardians' distraction that Oryx and his forces have placed, two houses in particular sought to use the war to give themselves an advantage. The House of Devils used an upgrade shank, Saber 2, to breach the Warmind Rasputin's firewalls and gain access to his weapons. However, Rasputin sent a distress signal to the Guardians, which they answered. They fought into one of Rasputin's bunkers and destroyed Saber 2, securing Rasputin's defenses. The House of Wolves, on the other hand, under the leadership of a renegade Archon Keldar and a reconstructed Prime Servitor Orbix Prime, were able to seize control of some of the underground bunkers of the Cabal on Mars, taking advantage of their losses from the war. Seeking to prevent the Wolves from becoming a threat again, Varix the Loyal insisted the aid of the Guardians to find the Archon and Prime Servitor and destroy them. The Guardians were successful in driving Keldar out of his hideout and locating Orbix Prime, killing them both. The death of the Prime Servitor and the Archon left the Wolves completely leaderless and broken. The House of Winter also took advantage of the war to successfully breach the Prison of Elders again and find a new leader. While they were able to liberate another Archon priest, the Taken intercepted them and claimed the priest, turning him into Nixus, Hunger of Oryx, scattering the Winters horribly. The Guardians responded to their efforts and succeeded in killing both Nixus and defeating the Taken. We had pushed the houses to their breaking point, but that made them desperate. Desperate enough for a group of splicers from the House of Devils to try something new. One year after the Taken War, a new Fallen resurgence occurred, greater than ever before, in the form of the House of Devils. Under the command of a new Archon, Axis, and his followers, the Devils pillaged every Golden Age vault and lab within the Cosmodrome they could find, and in their efforts, they unearthed Siva, a dangerous self-replicating nanotechnology from the Golden Age produced by Clovis Bray. Their technology was then studied by the Devil Splicers, who utilized this technology to augment their weapons and themselves to become more powerful than ever. Axis was among those who infused themselves with Siva, but at a much greater level, almost becoming completely machine, and named himself Axis Archon Prime. In addition, the Splicers resurrected their Prime Servitor using Siva, which became Sepix Perfected, as a means to prove the technology's worth to the rest of their house. Hoping to learn more about this ancient technology, the Devils under the command of Sepix Perfected attacked the Iron Temple, the former stronghold of the old Iron Lords that sealed Siva away. However, Lord Saladin, enlisting the aid of the Guardians, prevented the Devils from breaching the temple and drove Sepix into hiding. The Guardians were then sent to the Cosmodrome, where most of it lay in ruins and the Hive driven out of their holds, thanks to the Devil Splicers. In addition, the Devil Splicers breached the wall blocking off the Plague Lands where the Siva replication chamber, Site 6, was located. After destroying the Devil's defenses and gaining vital information from a Clovis Bray database on Mars, the Guardians launched a mission to destroy the replication chamber and finish what the Iron Lords started. After fighting through the Fallen into the chamber, the Guardians initiated the self-destruct sequence but faced off against the Siva-corrupted remnants of the Iron Lords. After a grueling battle with the corrupted remnants, putting the Iron Lords to rest, the self-destruction began, and the Guardian escaped in time. With Site 6 destroyed, the Devils lost the means to produce more Siva, but their leadership remained a significant threat. Lord Saladin and Shiro IV then tasked the newly named Iron Lords to dismantle the Devil's leadership. Their first target was the resurrected Prime Servitor, Sepix Perfected, who remained in hiding in its former lair. Gathering a team, the Guardians breached Sepix's defenses and battled with the Servitor once more. Despite its shielding and Siva upgrades, the Guardians destroyed the resurrected Prime as they did 2 years ago. This time for good. While patrolling the Plague Lands, the Guardians took notice in the increased activity and hostility between the Devil Splicers and the Hive. Investigations reveal that the Splicers have been experimenting on the Hive using Siva, whether to enslave them or make weapons out of them. Regardless, Shiro understood that such experiments could mean the end of the last city. Knowing the Splicers are following orders high in command, Shiro sent the Guardians to an old miso silo contested over by the Splicers and the Hive. Reaching the center of the Hive nest, the Guardians found an ogre dissected, but still alive, and the Splicer in charge of the Hive experiments, Kovic, Splicer Priest, with a weapon powered by the ogre's void eye. Battling the priest and the ogre, the Guardians succeeded in killing both, which Shiro hoped would end the experiments. In addition, the Guardians launched missions to the moon to prevent the Splicers from obtaining more ogre test subjects. With most of the leadership gone, the Guardians turned their sights onto the main Splicer leader, Axis, and his remaining followers. Gathering a force strong enough, the Guardians faced off with Axis's second-in-command, Vosic, the Archpriest, and used the Fallen's own siege engine to travel further into the Splicer's lair. After defeating Vosic, the Guardians traveled into the Siva server farm in Axis's lair, the Perfection Complex. There they battled with the Fallen Archon, but despite Axis's terrible Siva powers, the Guardians used Siva against him and successfully destroyed him, leaving the Devils leaderless once more. Months after the loss of Axis, the Splicers hoped to regain their advantage with a new leader, and in a desperate alliance with the crew of the infamous mercenary Tanix the Scarred. Using Siva to bring back the mercenary, Tanix became Tanix the Perfected. Though Siva overtook his mind, his leadership and ruthlessness remained, giving the Splicers a new leader. However, Varix heard the chatter of their efforts and informed the Vanguard. Thus, they sent the Guardians to the moon where they battled Tanix once more. Fighting through Splicer and Hive to Tanix's ship, the Guardians battled with the resurrected mercenary. Despite his Siva abilities and varied weaponry, Tanix Perfected was defeated, leaving the Devil leadership completely dismantled and their forces scattered. After the humiliating defeat in the Siva crisis, most Fallen in the entire system began to abandon their holdouts and retreat. The only supposed house to remain was the House of Kings, but they remained in hiding from the recent conflicts. The Guardian team observed what Fallen forces remained and found most of the Fallen's weapons and banners had either been abandoned or burned in large piles. This would mark the end of the Fallen's siege and the city had won the conflict. After Dominus Gaul occupied the last city, a seemingly new faction of Fallen resurfaced within the Sol system, the House of Dusk. These Fallen sport hoods, purple robes, and armor, along with new equipment not seen before their resurgence. From ghost scans of artifacts and tactics, it appears that the House of Dusk is a merger of all other Fallen houses. So many losses and the deaths of so many leaders forced the Fallen to unite out of sheer desperation. Even so, it is unknown who currently leads the House of Dusk, as the identities of its Kells, Barons, and Archons are also unknown. No Fallen communications have been detected from their old territories on the Moon, Mars, or Venus. They have set up beacons in different parts of the solar system, each sending signals outbound to their former homeworld. Despite the Guardians being preoccupied with the Red Legion and liberating the last city, they didn't turn a blind eye to the Fallen's activities.
After defeating Gaul and driving the Red Legion from the city, Guardian forces began missions that started disrupting Fallen operations, leading to the deaths of numerous servitors, captains, mining crews, Fallen walkers, valuable ether supplies, and even an Archon priest. Even so, the Vanguard still doesn't know who truly leads this new house. Capitalizing on the lack of leadership in the post-Taken War Reef, a group of dregs who collectively titled themselves the Scorned Barons banded together after they were cast out from the House of Exile. They waged a civil war against the fallen houses for practicing the old Eliksni ways, and the terror they unleashed had grown as powerful as any Kell, even having driven the House of Wolves to extinction through the destruction of all their servitors by the hands of Rexus Van. They even successfully allied with the local Hive Brood when Hyrax took In Anan as his consort. A short while after the Red War, Cade 6 gathered a small group of his most trusted guardians and, with the assistance of acting Regiment Commander Petrovenge, hunted down the Scorned Barons. At a final standoff, the Barons were defeated and those not killed were thrown deep within the Prison of Elders. Only one at the scene, their Archon, Fikrul, Shadow Priest, managed to escape. At some point following the Taken War, Prince Uldren, who had been corrupted by darkness and working with the House of Kings, discovered a mortally wounded Fikrul, who was once a well-regarded Archon priest of Calyx Prime within the House of Wolves, but was cast out after speaking against the Great Machine and lamenting his species' dependence on servitors for survival. Wishing to save him, Riven granted Uldren's wish, and part of Uldren's darkness transferred into Fikrul's ether, raising him as the first of the Scorn. Both Fikrul and Uldren found each other as kindred spirits, usurped Krask, and immediately took over the House of Kings. Fikrul then docked and demoted the former Kell to Dreg status before slaughtering the house in a grand betrayal, as Uldren decided that the Kings were too bothersome for his ambitions. With the use of Dark Ether, Fikrul began to hammer the fallen society and raised the deceased Kings as new undead army named the Scorn. During the opening of the Red War, Variks watched from the Prison of Elders as the Red Legion cut a swath into the solar system. He tried to send a warning to the last city under the name Greenraven, but was unable to do so as the Red Legion knocked out the city's communication capabilities. He also sent a warning to the fallen houses, including the Kell of Kings, to convince them to help him unify and save what was left of the Eliksni. Variks watched in horror as his sensors showed the Traveller getting trapped within the cage, and the Guardians fall. After the Red War, Variks was tasked with interrogating a mysterious group of fallen in the Prison of Elders. To his shock, he learned that his former friend Fikrul was the leader of the so-called Scorn and was allegedly responsible for killing Krask. With the last of the Kells assumed dead, Variks' hopes of a united Eliksni crumbled as he locked all the Barons into cryopod cells. Variks asked his old friend about the whereabouts of Calyx Prime, whom both made a pact to hide away, and asked Fikrul if he had betrayed the last Prime to the Taken, and if that was the source of his corrupted ether. Fikrul replied that Calyx had abandoned the Eliksni altogether. All the while, Uldren attempted to test Variks' loyalty with his Kell, Queen Mara Sov. However, Variks found himself thinking about the old House of Rain proverb of the Kell of Kells. After much thought, Variks decided that he would become the Kell of House Judgment so that he could unify his race. To do so, he figured that he would need to cause a prison riot so that he could abandon his service to the Awoken without being noticed. He prepared by running simulations on the prison security system, making adjustments to them based on the simulation results, and had a final talk with his High Servitor, deeming it the last warden of the prison. He then had a final talk with Fikrul and Uldren on the day of the prison break, informing Uldren that he had more service to do. The Mad Warden, acting as Variks, then sent a message through the speakers announcing a malfunction in the security system, and had commenced the shutdown and reboot, which resulted in all prison cells and cryopods opening. As the cells opened, Variks made his way through the secret passageway that Petra and Cade used to smuggle Fikrul and Uldren into the prison, and recorded 2 messages to be sent through the prison's relay. The first message he recorded was with his synth voice device turned off to talk in high speak, to give commands to those Eliksni who would answer the call of House Judgment. The second message he recorded was with his synth device about the whispers he hears from all those around him of his insulting titles, and how he will become the Kell of the House of Judgment, an envoy for the Eliksni. He boarded a ship full of the prison's ether supply and was saluted by a Vandal bearing the colours of the House of Wolves. A year after the Red War came to a close, the Guardian and Cade 6 travelled to the reef to investigate the unrest, but were ambushed by Uldren and the leading 7 Barons of the Scorn. along with their spiritual leader and Archon, Fikrul. Cade was then beaten, his ghost destroyed, and then killed by Aldrin Sov in cold blood. Outraged by the death of the Hunter Vanguard, the Guardians, acting upon their own accord and unsanctioned by the Vanguard, returned to the reef to start the hunt for the Scorn and the rogue awoken prince, to avenge Cade 6. Upon the breakout of the Scorn, the House of Dusk also began to fight the Scorn, beginning a new civil war within the Eliksni race. In the end, Aldrin Sov, the former disgraced prince of the reef and murderer of Cade 6, is executed, avenging Cade's death and all those who perished during the Scorn's rampage in the reef. While remnants of the weakened Scorn remain in the Tangled Shore, the Guardians continue their vigilance over the region, both to keep their bargain with the Spider, and to make sure the Scorn no longer pose a threat. Though the Scorn was nothing more than a pawn to Riven in opening the gateway within the Dreaming City, the Scorn remained active in their efforts to spread chaos within the reef. Over time, the Scorn's Archon Fikrul returns after his supposed death, swearing vengeance for the deaths of his fellow Scorn Barons. The Guardians track Fikrul back to the Scorn's lair and battle with the Twisted Archon once again. Despite his Dark Ether powers, Fikrul was defeated once again, but he swears that he will return to have his revenge. In addition to the Guardians' campaigns, the Taken have also managed to deal more damage to the Fallen as they continue to corrupt the Dreaming City and spread the Taken curse. Following the aftermath of the Lunar incident and the arrival of the Black Fleet, Eramis abandoned the Devil's banners and formed the House of Salvation from remnants of their former House of Devils, Wolves, and Dusk to investigate an extra reef territory called Niflheim. Unverified reports also suggest Variks to be among the group, unknown if he was a co-conspirator or a prisoner, but it is suggested they discovered a dangerous entity on the site. It was soon revealed that Variks and Eramis joined forces, despite the previous enmity towards each other, and journeyed to Europa with as many Eliksni who answered their call to build a new home for themselves, Reborn, under the banner of the House of Salvation. However, while Eramis and her council did care for their people, their hatred for the Traveller poisoned their intentions, and to Variks' horror, Eramis gained the power of stasis from the pyramid that dwelled on Europa, through a splinter of darkness. Dubbing herself the Kell of Darkness and spreading her gift to her followers, Eramis intended to not only return her people to glory, but also destroy the Traveller for abandoning their kind centuries ago. Variks, refusing to allow his people to follow the path Eramis is leading them, fled Reborn with a splinter stolen from Eramis. With little to no options, Variks finds a communications center and sent out a distress signal to the Guardians, warning them of Eramis' threat, but the splinter he had acquired got stolen by the Exo-Stranger, now known to us as Elsie Bray. The Guardian, who was on Europa scouting the pyramid, located there, as many others of its kind had arrived in the Sol system, heard his message and arrived just in time before he was executed by Eramis' forces. Despite being partially responsible for Cade 6's death, the Guardians agreed to help Variks combat Eramis before she creates an army of darkness-empowered Eliksni that would destroy the last city. The Guardians enter into Reborn, witnessing the Kell of Darkness granting the power of stasis to her lieutenants, but are caught during the gathering. Forcing the Guardians to flee as Eramis' stasis powers prove too strong for them to handle. Aware of the power that the Dark Kell possesses, the Exo-Stranger, Eris Morn, and the Drifter emerge with similar stasis powers as the Pyramid, creates what the Exo-Stranger calls a ziggurat, which would allow them to tap into the darkness to gain the same power of stasis, thereby granting them the power needed to battle Eramis and her House Salvation. Though Variks disapproves of the Guardians using the same power as stasis, he agrees there is no alternative. Knowing they cannot directly challenge Eramis, the Guardian and Variks work on dismantling her empire and army. They begin by targeting Eramis' strongest warrior and general, Phylax the Warrior. Striking down his soldiers to get her attention, Phylax openly challenges the Guardian, calling them to meet her near the Nexus where the Vex on Europa dwell. Despite her strength and power over stasis, the Guardians slay Phylax, taking her splinter of darkness and robbing Eramis of her general. Gaining momentum, Variks has the Guardian target the visionary behind Eramis' army, Praxis, the Technorat, whose experiments allowed House Salvation's technology to wield the darkness. Tracking the Technorat to a Clovis Bray lab where the Exos were designed and made, the Guardians battle Praxis' machines before cornering him at the lab's core. Despite his devices and the power of stasis, the Guardians bring the Technorat down, thereby preventing Eramis from acquiring more weapons and machines from Praxis' research. Without her counsel, Variks believes Eramis will now act recklessly and lash out, True to his prediction, Aramis is furious at the loss of 2 of her lieutenants and desires to retaliate. The Kell of Darkness orders Atrax to head to the crypt and prepare the body, and orders a message to be sent to Earth. The Vanguard intercepts this message, and Zavala informs the Guardian that the message is directed towards the Cosmodrome. Varix believes that Aramis is attempting to gain reinforcements from the remnants of the old House of Devils, who he knows would answer whatever call Aramis gave them. The Guardians arrive at the Cosmodrome just in time to halt the House of Salvation's efforts, witnessing them gathering a large number of spider tanks. Slaying the commanders in charge of the operation, the Guardians prevented such reinforcements from ever reaching Europa, enraging Aramis even further. Pushed to the brink, Aramis seeks more reinforcements in the form of the Vex, by opening a portal Clovis Bray I was experimenting on, which would then allow the Vex to flood onto Europa. Believing that Aramis has truly gone mad, Varix warns the Guardians to make haste to stop her. Though Aramis activates the portal, the Guardians can halt the Vex by destroying Belmo, Transcendent Mine. With Aramis's reinforcements denied, Varix has the Guardians aid him in evacuating the Eliksni who wish to flee from Aramis. The Guardians can liberate skiffs holding such Eliksni from Aramis's forces and direct them to Mithrax of the House of Light, finally granting them safe refuge. With her forces backed into a corner, the Guardians re-enter Reborn to confront Aramis and end her dark reign. However, Aramis trapped the Guardians and their ghosts in stasis, threatening to overtake them. Heeding the Exo-Stranger's words to look within, they embrace the darkness, freeing themselves and shocking Aramis. With stasis at their command again, the Guardians battled Aramis, but the Kell of Darkness is ultimately beaten into submission. Refusing to accept this defeat, Aramis is about to rise again, but to her shock and horror, the stasis she believed was hers to control began to overtake her, completely turning her into a statue made out of stasis, thereby ending her reign. The Guardians acquire her Splinter of Darkness and return to the Ziggurat, allowing them to enter the European Pyramid, and embrace the darkness, fully acquiring the power of stasis. Following Aramis's fall, the Guardians continue to work alongside Varix, with the Eliksni scribe being granted temporary immunity by the Vanguard, in safeguarding fleeing Eliksni and holding back what remains of the House of Salvation. To ensure the House of Salvation doesn't regain its strength, Varix has the Guardians entered into the main foundry of Reborn to sabotage its factories, thereby stripping the House of Salvation of powerful war machines. After striking down a powerful war brig, the Guardians are successful in shutting down the factory. During another mission, the Guardians enter Reborn again to push back the House of Salvation as they currently battle with the Vex. The Guardians notice that the Salvation Fallen are handling the Vex better than expected, which Varix takes a sign of new leadership having emerged to take Aramis's place. Their leader turns out to be Kritis, the Priestess, a fanatical follower of Aramis and the Darkness. Kritis seeks to regather the House of Salvation, believing that Aramis is not dead, but resting and learning from the Darkness directly. Worse, Kritis believes she has the means to awaken the fallen Kell of Darkness. Rushing to where they defeated Aramis, the Guardians confront Kritis and her Prime Servitor, Yamix Prime, House Salvation. Despite her Prime Servitor's power and Kritis' own stasis power, the Guardians succeed in slaying the Priestess, eliminating another leader of the House of Salvation. Without Aramis or Kritis, Varix believes that many of the fallen who pledged to the House of Salvation will likely scatter, taking refuge with either the House of Dusk or the House of Light. Despite this, Varix also worries that even though Aramis has fallen, her actions will fade and likely make her grow into a legend, a figure that will inspire others to follow her example. Much later, the Exo-Stranger would task the Guardians to raid the Deepstone Crypt to prevent the remnants of House Salvation, led by Atrax, the last of Aramis's lieutenants, from gaining any knowledge left by Clovis Bray regarding the Exos. As the Guardians enter the crypt, they discover that Atrax has already transformed herself into a fallen Exo, now calling herself Atrax-1. The Guardians chase Atrax through the facility, but they eventually discover that Atrax-1 has brought back an old foe to life, Tanix, who angrily recognizes the Guardians who defeated him countless times. The Guardians continue to chase Atrax until they corner her at Clovis Bray's space station, the Morning Star. After a strong struggle and using Clovis Bray's technology, the Guardians slay Atrax-1, but their battles have forced the space station into its security nuclear descent protocol, a protocol put in place by Clovis to ensure the wrong hands would never seize his work. Following Tanix to the bridge of the station, the Guardians engage the mercenary in an all-for-nothing gambit to save Europa, as the station hurtled at terminal velocity towards it before crashing. As the Guardians pull themselves out of the wreckage, they discover that Tanix has also survived at the last minute by fusing himself with a heavy shank, turning himself into Taniks the Abomination. Once more, the Guardians battled the mechanical monstrosity that Taniks had become, but despite his advanced weaponry and the Salvation Fallen forces who survived the crash, the Guardians can finally slay Taniks once and for all. Though the Guardians can secure the Deepstone Crypt from House Salvation, the Exo-Stranger has the Guardians continue to monitor and protect the crash site to prevent any Salvation Fallen from salvaging anything useful or dangerous. According to rumours, a copy of Atrax 1's mine still exists out there somewhere, and the version defeated in the crypt was a copy. Whether or not Atrax 1 continues to live is yet to be confirmed. Following the Guardians fighting back against the Wrathborn corruption and reaching an accord with the Cabal Empress Keitel, Guardians discover the last city has fallen under an endless night. Knowing that the Vex are responsible, Ikora Rey sends the Guardian to Europa to find the one individual who could aid them in combating the Vex directly, Mithrax of the House of Light. Travelling to the last location Mithrax was found, they discovered that Mithrax was attempting to transport refugees fleeing from the violence of House of Salvation, but were ambushed by the Vex. Racing to Mithrax, who was protecting the remaining refugees, the Guardians finally meet the last of the Sacred Splicers, who asks the Guardian to help his people hide from the Vex. The Guardian agrees and enters a rift Mithrax opened that leads them directly into the Vex domain, and with his guidance, the Guardian destroyed the subjective mind, taking a segment of its code and bringing it back to Mithrax. Understanding they have a common enemy and are equally in danger, Ikora Rey offers Mithrax and his House of Light sanctuary within the walls of the last city. Mithrax accepts, granting his people a safe place to dwell, though he knows that not everyone, both in the people of the last city and his own, will be open to the idea of former enemies living alongside each other. With Mithrax and the House of Light officially aligned with the Vanguard in the last city, the Guardians work on discovering the truth of the Vex's plan and end the endless night. With Mithrax guiding them, the Guardians succeed in slaying numerous subjective and oppressive minds, gaining data which they return to Mithrax or Lakshmi II of the future war cult. Tensions built for weeks until it became so unsustainable that the Eliksni refugees came to a head after Lakshmi II sent out a broadcast denouncing the Fallen and the Vanguard's alliance with the House of Light, warning the people of the last city of a coming invasion. As a result, the Eliksni's ether supply cache was sabotaged by frightened individuals. Not wanting to alienate Mithrax and his people, Ikora has Saint 14 investigate the sabotage and the Guardians to assure the people of their alliance, and remind them that the people of the last city were not that different from the Fallen before the city was razed. Further, she plans on having a talk with Lakshmi about her broadcast, despite the Vanguard not wanting to interfere with city politics to begin with. Despite Quaria's destruction and the return of daylight, Lakshmi continues to spread her message against the House of Light. Worse, she conspired with the other faction leaders to assume control over the consensus, oust the Vanguard leadership, and forcefully expel the House of Light from the last city, convinced that the Eliksni would have a hand in the coming tragedy. However, Lakshmi's attempts to use a Vex portal to send the Eliksni away from the last city would be her undoing. To commemorate their victory over the Endless Night and ending Lakshmi's conspiracy, the Vanguard and the House of Light organize a memorial at the tower, celebrating their unity. The Guardians would visit the memorial to pay their respects to the lost heroes, both human and Eliksni, with Mithrax speaking that even though they may never see the lost heroes again, they will always remember them, and in the light, they are united. The House of Light joins the Awoken, the Vanguard, and the Imperial Cabal to form the Coalition, as the Guardians prepare for the Witness's arrival in the Sol System to finish what it started during the collapse. Following the Guardians' containment of the Nightmare outbreak on the derelict Leviathan and pushing Callus back in his attempts to claim the Lunar Pyramid and become a disciple of the Witness, the Guardians received a message from the Drifter, calling in a favour to reclaim a piece of cargo he had intended to smuggle into the last city, but was stolen by a group of Fallen from the House of Salvation. Agreeing to the favour, the Guardians headed to Europa, travelling through what's left of Reborn. After fighting through Salvation Fallen, the Guardian located the Drifter's cargo, which turned out to be a stasis pod with the Spider himself within. Spider explained that he was seeking haven within the last city, as after Marasov's return and awareness of his treatment of her brother, the Eliksni Syndicate leader sought to escape the reef before the Awoken Queen's gaze turned upon him. Though annoyed by the Drifter's demands for hazard pay, Spider relinquishes by offering his old ketch for his use when the rogue threatens to turn him over to Queen Mara, as she had put a heavy bounty on his head. As Spider was transported to safety and the Guardian travelled to where the Spider's catch was impounded, Spider informs the Guardian and Drifter that despite being crippled, the House of Salvation was beginning to rally and was seeking lost relics from the Dark Age. Unsure of what that meant, The Guardian pressed on, gathering what was left of the Spider's crew as they made their way to the catch. However, after slaying the Salvation crew leader, the Guardian discovered the stasis prison of Aramis, the original leader of House Salvation, was no longer containing her. The conclusion is made that Aramis must be the person rallying the House of Salvation. The catch is put to Drifter's use in bringing Spider and his crew to the last city. Shortly after it was discovered, Aramis was hunting objects known as the Relics of Nezarec. After weeks of collecting, Eido offered a parley to Aramis where it was revealed that Eido's father, Mithrax, was truly capable of, thus driving a wedge between father and daughter. As it turned out, the Lucent Hive, no doubt under the orders of Amaru, was also hunting for the relics. This all came to a head during a final confrontation between both Kells of Light and Dark, ending in yet another defeat for Aramis. Aramis ultimately escaped, but appears to have started to doubt her cause, outright abandoning her post as Kell of House Salvation, and disappearing into the stars, following her defeat on Seraph Station, leaving her fellow Fallen at the mercy of Xivu Arath and the Witness. Following the conflicts with the Witness, the entity gained entrance into the Traveller's Pale Heart. The Guardians would contend with risky bargains to follow the Witness. Crow was able to enter first after making a wish from Riven. Ultimately, as the Witness neared enacting the final shape, the Guardian and the Vanguard managed to pass through the portal and worked on thwarting the entity's plan, encountering House Salvation Fallen as they conducted their mission, fighting alongside the Witness's army, the Dread. Though the intent of the Witness's final shape was made clear to all, the Salvation Fallen continued to serve the Witness, with Ikora stating that likely the Witness merely told the Fallen what they wanted to hear about its final shape. Despite the Salvation Fallen efforts to thwart the Guardians' efforts, they made headway in reuniting with the Vanguard and learning of a way to destroy the Witness. Aramis herself, however, would not take part in the battles within the Pale Heart. Instead, the former Shipstealer opted to flee outside of Sol, hoping to reunite with the one closest to her as the final shape took place. Operations within the Pale Heart would lead to a former Winter Captain and Aramis's current right hand, Korra the Hollow. Korra was leading mining operations, hoping to harvest paracausal energy from the Tree of Silver Wings directly. Unfortunately for the Salvation Fallen, Mithrax and the Guardian would learn of their operations and disrupt them before having a confrontation with Korra on Europa. The Scorn would also be active within the Traveller's Pale Heart, both in serving their master and corrupting the light using Dark Ether. Crow, the Guardian, and a revived Cade 6 would learn of their scheme and work together in hunting them down. After tracking down numerous pockets of Scorn, the group succeeded in cornering the abomination spreading the Dark Ether, with Crow and Cade slaying it, stopping the corruption. As the final battle with the Witness approached, the entity gathered all its remaining servants to defend its monolith, as the entity attempted to complete its final shape. However, despite the Witness's efforts and that of its servants, the Guardian raid team succeeded in severing its hold on the Traveller's light and further wounded it, forcing the Witness to retreat. Yet this only delayed its ending, as the entire coalition and their allies, including Mithrax and his House of Light, assaulted the Witness before a Guardian team of 12 succeeded in unmaking the Witness using the Traveller's Light to destroy the entity's collective consciousness, destroying it for good, thus avenging all the civilizations the Witness had victimized and destroyed, the Eliksni and their whirlwind included. Mithrax and his House of Light would rejoice along with the rest of the last city in celebrating the fall of the Witness. However, the Vanguard still had to contend with the aftermath, as House Salvation would turn upon itself and the Scorn would lash out in the absence of their master. Further, Aramis and Fikrul remained at large, leading the Spider, Varix and Crow to track their whereabouts. With 3 echoes of the Witness's power cast out into the universe, one of which being in the hands of the newly re-emerged Maya Sundaresh, we must flush out all threats that would seek to claim the echoes or fill the power vacuum left by the death of the Witness. A new age is upon us, Guardians, and if my intel is correct, Fikrul seems to have acquired the second echo and we must put a stop to it. I don't expect this to be easy, and I know it's a lot to take in, but our enemies are numerous and so we must be ready for anything. While you handled the new Scorn threat, the Empress, in preparation for the reclaiming of Torabato, has requested that the Vanguard prepares a briefing on all the information we have on the Hive. The Hive is one of our oldest enemies, so I am more than happy to oblige. Until next time, Guardians, you are dismissed. Happy hunting, and stay frosty.